Howdy, all you delicious people. I am here today to review Scream from 2022. We could have just called this Scream 5, but heaven forbid you just slap a number on something anymore. You can't even do that. You're just going to call it Scream from this year. That's a thing that I hate. I wish that they would just come up with a title name. Because at least you could not, it would be easier to search. It would, you wouldn't have to put the year the movie came out for people oh yeah, it's that one. Okay, cool, he's doing that one. Besides the images that are to be put into the forefront of whatever, because I would much rather want to go back and rewatch the original Scream. Really just after watching this one, because I would actually get scared during the first original Scream movie, because that one is actually really scary, even if I've watched it more than 100 times. So, speaking of the original Scream, a lot of this movie just feels like they're just recycling the very first original Scream movie, and they have to basically blatantly tell you that's what they're doing. Hey guys, there's so much about this that has to be like a Ghostbusters Afterlife, Matrix Resurrection thing, and they also have to blatantly tell you that it's like, hey guys, yeah, we're going to be doing what every other one of these back to franchise movie things goes and does, and we're just gonna we're gonna have these new random people coming in, but then we have to just bring back a couple of those original OG Scream characters, and they have to seem to be so much smarter this time around because they're so experienced through all of those Scram movies, all them Scrams. So we have here a movie that I wish would have had a lot more exciting approach of this movie. We really just kind of have a deflating ending of this one, where I'm just really? That's the story? That's the way this ends? Okay. To me, throughout this whole entire movie, I embraced this movie by going like this. To me, there was never one point where I was actually scared during this film. There was no point of me where I actually laughed at this film. There should be some joking things that, I guess people could get a good chuckle out, or people could be scared by this movie. Really, I kind of got annoyed with the fact that really when jump scares were to come in, they had to use sound to try to go, ooh, I think that got me. Because heaven forbid you actually legitimately do an actual jump scare. Everything about this movie just felt like they were copying and pasting from the original, and they obviously say that in the movie. Really, I'm kind of happy that they went on and they referenced so many horror movies in this film, because then people will retroactively go back and look at all those horror films. And thanks, because that'll help me for future content for this YouTube channel, because might as well. Might as well. I've already covered It Follows. Luckily, they mentioned that. And I'll go on, and I guess I'll eventually review Babadook, because they mentioned that. Thanks. Thanks for helping me out, Scream. Movie who will not be numbered. Obviously, they could have gone on and replaced the S with a 5, and I would have been all right. That's a new logo, that's a new approach. And plus also, that would be easier for people to search find it if it was 5 Scream or 5 Cream. Then people would have obviously found this a lot easier. But yeah, so I can say that I can at least say that I can have fun with this movie. But there was a number of scenarios where I was kind of hoping it to go in certain directions where it really didn't. And then the end result is me just kind of going in, all right. Uh, really, this movie doesn't feel creative enough. Really, the movie is just very flat to me. And, but I'm sure a lot of people probably really did like this film. I want to say that this movie is to be on a positive approach of things, but that feels just very like on the lowest scale of positive things. Like I would have to say that this movie is between an okay and good kind of approach because really there is not one moment where I went through here and I was like, man, like I'm not going to see any of this coming. I've seen too many of these. It's getting down to the point where you're like predicting that, like, oh, like this is probably going to happen now because it hasn't happened numerous times by now. So with that said, let's go out of our way. Let's just go into spoilers about this one. Let me know how you felt about this Scream, which is Scream, I guess, 2022. I'm sure a lot of people could be like, hey man, like, I get it. Like, I love this movie and you bash it and hate it and whatever because it has to be just like the first one. I've seen the first one over 100 times over one summer when I was young. Really, the one thing that I thought was kind of funny is they, of course, reused the Red Right Hand song, the Red Right Hand, which, of course, was used in the original Scream, like right around when we're at the end of the first Scream movie, and we're having Gale Weathers' cameraman and the van kind of making their way to Stu's party. And like every single time when I watch that movie, I can immediately just cue up exactly when that song is going to drop. To the point when you just see it like every single time, I could just be like, yep, it's going to queue up right here. And so it's kind of fun that they use that song. Um, I would always like look at that and just be like, okay, why does that song have to be so like prominent? Like, I wish that there would have been a more like prominent Scream song, but there never was. But I guess you just have to go back to one of the songs that was used in the original movie, and I guess that was the only one that could really just stick out, I guess. So, speaking of sticking out, without a doubt, we have it where in this movie here, stab is to be the focused thing. Remember the movie franchise that they use so often, where in I think Scream 2 we had Jada Pinkett Smith's character who had died in a movie theater. Spoilers if people haven't watched any of the other Screams and are watching the fifth Scream because they thought that they didn't have to watch any of the other Scream movies. Really, you could probably just watch the very first Scream film, probably, and that's probably all you really need to know. Uh, really, all the other ones are kind of just after a while, it like I would probably go on and watch like 1 and 2, but 3 and 4, man, does that really get in some flimsy territory where like the stories just really aren't that good anymore. But like for 2, like the killer for that one isn't all that like I'm not all excited about Scream 2 either. For who are the killers in Scream 2? Uh, Cue us up some Timothy Olyphant. spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen any of the other prior Scream movies. That's what you should have done. That's what you should do before you go through this one. Really, when we get into the whatever the last one was, really that one, it was like, hey, the killers no longer matter. Kind of like in this one, the killers no longer matter. So let's go out of our way to say that it's that time again. Let's just go into spoilers because I've already talked for 10 minutes about this movie. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. I don't know what it was. I don't know what happened there with my finger gun because man, were we having some problems with that. So let's go into it. So the beginning of this film, of course, is to have us meet a girl named Tara, who is to be all over her house, just kind of, I guess, texting some friends of hers. Here's the one thing that I will say here. I guess for this variation, because I watched a bootleg movie, I didn't watch the theater version. Going into a theater and watching it, whatever, because I couldn't be bothered. Plus, there's a lot of these where I kind of question the quality for a number of movies, so I always have to just be like, yeah, am I just going to get like some rehashing or a thing that I'm not going to overall enjoy or like or whatever? So I'm just going to go in and watch it first, see the value in it, and just be like, oh man, this one's good enough for me to want to rewatch it later. But this movie, I was just like, hey man, bootleg? Heck yeah. Because I was thinking, I'm like, what kind of quality are we getting with this movie? And the quality just really echoes for me to go and watch a bootleg of it. Go into a Google search and search the word letter C movies, letter, and then word. You can go and find this app where you can basically see almost anything. You could also Google search Fox HD movies, and you can go and download an app that Darren Fact can help you watch any number of things. Compile that with possibly a Google Store thing called TV Crush. Be able to see whatever you want. So yeah, definitely would say for you to go out of your way to download those apps. If you want to see bootleg version that's kind of like the picture quality is then you could go out of your way to watch Scream without going to a theater, because that's normally what I do. So, but this version of the version that I saw, anything that is to go on as text is to have been done, I guess, in Spanish. No offense to anybody. I saw, I could see, because I took a Spanish class once, years ago, in school, and so there were some words that I could make out, but not everything. There was like a U, or there was a the, or there was something like that, but there was nothing I can overall just make out. Don't make out. Anyways, because you might die in a horror film. So, back to this movie. So, Tara, of course, is to be getting a call from her home phone, not her cell phone, because heaven forbid we do that nowadays. So, Tara, of course, is to eventually go and answer this phone, and it's a guy named Charles, who is to mention that he is to be wanting to give a message to, of course, I think Sam, or Tara's mother. Yeah, I think it's Tara's mother. So I don't remember. It's, even though I should. So, but the message eventually is that I think it's Tara's mother. Let's try to do this correct here. So, heaven forbid, we never actually show who the mother of Sam was, and that bugs the out of me to no end. because I'm like, wait a minute, I want to backtrack to this to who is Sam's mother because that's freaking important. Uh, but laziness, right? Laziness of story. So, but let's keep pushing on. So Tara is to go and talk to a guy named Charles, who's to mention that he's in a group with Tara's mom, and they are to go on. And I guess this mother is to divulge uh, that I guess her mom is to be uh, uh, saying that Tara is very creative and that she is to be a movie and TV buff. And Tara's like, well, anybody could be that. It's like, you gotta put in more specifics. And so Charles, whoever this Charles guy is to mention that Tara loves horror movies. And so, and that I guess her mom is proud that Tara's to be a fan of horror movies, and she's kind of wondering what Tara's favorite scary movie is. We have to so just harpen back onto the freaking other freaking movies. Oh my god, here. To where really just Tara feels like the Drew Barrymore character. I was waiting for like her boyfriend to be in the backyard somewhere, taped up and whatever, because I thought that was gonna happen in this story, but I guess not. Man, what a freaking just disappointment. But we have the kind of like the what door am I at kind of thing in this story also. So we have Tara, who eventually is to mention that her favorite horror movie is Babadook. Whatever, like, I think Babadook is some kind of like boogeyman-ish like story. I think I've seen the trailer of it, and I know it's like a boogeyman kind of story where you have this. I think the mother reads this kid some Babadook story, and then the kid gets frightened by it. It's like some kind of boogeyman kind of story. So Tara is to convince Charles about how Babadook is to be this kind of interesting horror movie, and so we go on here, and eventually we have this guy asking Tara. It's like, well, like, don't you like the stab movies? And Tara's like, no, like I like It Follows, or I like so and so XYZ horror movies that I'd have to go back and watch here, so that way I can eventually go and have some content for future stuff. That's what happens when you go and watch a horror movie, and then retroactively everybody goes and, hey, they referenced this movie. Now everybody has to go and back and watch every single thing that they re-referenced here. So it's true, it happens a lot more often than everybody thinks, because a lot of people probably haven't seen It Follows. I think It Follows might be on Tubi right now, not quite sure, but hey, It Follows is actually a really good horror movie. I reviewed it. I liked it. It's a goofy kind of approach, but it's interesting nonetheless. Michael Rosenbaum, he does a YouTube thing called Inside of You, and it was to like It Follows, and so really you can go and watch his podcast, and eventually he'll say that somewhere that he likes It Follows. But I'm sure he likes other things. So go and ask him. Comment onto his YouTube channel. Hey, what do you like besides It Follows? I think he likes The Thing also. The original one, the Kurt Russell one. I don't know, not quite sure. Anyways, pushing on. So it's been a while. I could be wrong about that. So, God, I'm tangenting it up already. So Tara goes on and is to eventually now have to be forced to answer all these questions about Stab. And of course, she's like IMDbing it up, trying to find these answers. She's like, "Oh yeah, like I want to see the cast list of Stab so I can figure out who the killer is." So, So we go on, and we also have it where, of course, Tara is trying to text a girl named Amber, thinking consistently that it's uh, Amber who is kind of trying to do this to Tara. And so Ghostface is to the killer, whichever one iteration of murderers this is, because maybe there's three of them in this movie. Because heaven forbid that would be a different kind of approach to this film. So, all because I like the kind of the tech savvy way that we're kind of doing this now for this movie, even though still. Anyways, so Ghostface is to be at Amber's window holding this phone up and like, hey, yeah, like I'm gonna go after Amber if you don't answer these questions. And so now you're gonna have to answer these questions about the stab film. And she's like, I haven't seen the stab film. Maybe I can find it on Netflix somewhere. That has to be a joke, right? Maybe I can find it on Netflix. All right, great. Thanks, Randy Quaid. Thank you for making a Netflix joke. And then they have to reiterate the Netflix joke. Oh, hilarious. So, or Jack Quaid, my bad. Who Randy Quaid is like this, or is full. My bad. Jack Quaid, my bad. Uh, I was probably thinking of his actual name in the movie, who's Richie. There we go. Anyways, so names confused. So Tara goes on and is to now start having to forcibly answer all these questions. And the first question is to be tied to Sidney Prescott. And really, the guy said, like, well, right answer, but like, that was easy. Like, she was in every single one of those stab movies. I'm like, so what? But then the next question, of course, is to be tied to, I think, Gale Weathers, the original person that wrote the Stab films. And, of course, Tara is to get that right. But then the following question after that is like, oh, well, who was the original killers in the Stab movie? And so we, of course, have it to where Tara is like, oh, well, Billy Loomis. I got the answer right. Yeah, I did it. But then all of a sudden, we have the killer is like, oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong answer. Because there has to be some kind of wrong answer coming out of this, right? And so the whole thing was really just a quick trick question because there was two killers in the first movie. And of course, it was Billy and Stu. So we, of course, have it to where it seems that the killer isn't going to murder and kill Amber because we don't see that. Instead, the killer is just going after Tara here. So, the one thing that I could say is a big plus about this, these Ghostface killers in this movie, it seems like they have much more of a strategic way about murdering somebody. It seems like they're like really strong and eventually they are to really get the job done, so to speak. It doesn't feel like they're like flimsier than all the other killers where it feels like they are to be strategic about how they go and stab a person, let's just say, because it seems like they kind of use their full weight trying to stab into somebody, and I kind of appreciate that weirdly. Even though we have a massive amount of just stabbing that just kind of goes on, it's like, yeah, let's just keep just quick. How many 20 some odd stabs can I just be like, hey, let's to where it's almost a joke. So Tara is to go and scramble and trying to have her alarm system go and be on. And all of a sudden, it's like this back and forth, on and off with this alarm system because I guess they go on and they say that they can kind of clone a phone and stuff like that with the ghost face technology of things. And so this alarm system keeps unlocking, unlocking. So, locking, unlocking. So, eventually Tara is to get the phone and like, oh, who could this be? The murderer? And so the murderer, I mean the murderer, the killer, the ghost face, is to say, it's like, well, here's the bonus question. Well, like, did I get into your house before you could set the alarm? And so, yes, he could. And so now he starts stabbing away at Tara. And so Tara is mentioning that the police is coming, and because the alarm has gone off and whatever. So what ends up happening is that Ghostface is to really just stab into this woman, but Tara is to not die here. So she ends up technically getting away for reasons that are just to be like, well, there has to be a reason for this, but there is, because really we're just trying to goad out Samantha to come back to Woodbury, because Samantha is to actually be a relative of one of the original Scream people. So isn't that great? So we now have it to where we have a character called Wes, who is going and calling Sam Carpenter and letting her know that her sister is in the hospital because she had been stabbed numerous times by Ghostface. We have Sam Carpenter, who I guess is working or just being in a bowling team at this place called Cardinal Lanes. I only remember that simply because really there was an actual like sign that was big and massive, and plus also I remember it because it was my high school mascot. That's the only way I could remember that. So we go on here and we have, of course, Richie, who comes out, who of course is Jack Quaid here, who is to comfort Sam as she is to find out that her sister had been stabbed. So we of course have it to where Richie's like, hey, like, how about you and me go off to Woodbury and we go on and just kind of meet up with your sis. And Sam is to say that the reason why Sam and her sister are kind of so distant is because I guess Sam was to go on and find out who her actual real father was, and it was actually to be Billy Loomis, or of course the original Billy Killer from the original Scream movie. And so we actually end up having Sam weirdly see the ghost of her father numerous times in this movie. So Billy is back in this film. And a lot of people are like, heck yeah, yeah, stab. A lot of people will be happy by that. Like, I feel like I have mixed feelings about it because it feels like a Amazing Spider-Man 2 approach to bringing somebody back. But I can also just be like, well, yeah, heck yeah, you're trying to bring back as much people as you can possibly do it without bringing back Stu, because that's the way that I would have wanted this to happen. Because Matthew, the guy who plays Stu in this movie, Matthew, was to go on an interview and mention that there was some story that they were at one point going to try and bring Stu back to the franchise and have him have kids that were to go on and kill a number of people, and then have it come back to Stu and have him still be a guy to come back as a killer. And I'm like, why shouldn't they have done that in this story? Well, they didn't. They just took a lazier way out of things, in all honesty. So Sam goes and tells Richie her backstory, and so now both Sam and Richie are driving on, and we of course have it to where we're talking about like certain horror films on their drive to make it to Tara, and saying that, hey, like there might have weirdly been someone out there that it was to see like the Friday the 13th movie and see Jason Voorhees and say like, hey, well maybe that's a good idea. Maybe this guy has some sound ideas and whatever, this whole Jason Voorhees guys. And so they're going and talking about horror films and stuff like that, and that at some point we have it to where it seems uh, we go on and have Richie, who is possibly thinking that he now, since technically Sam had been tied to the original killer, we're having Richie who's wanting to go on and watching the Stab movies because they're conveniently on Netflix right now. What a joke. So, are all the Scream movies on Netflix right now? No, they're not. And if they are, they should be. As a joke. And where do you think that this movie's heading? Probably to Netflix. Because people, I don't know if a lot of people will go out of their way to watch this one in theaters, but I don't know. I could be wrong, because I'm assuming people are like, heck yeah, let's all go and watch Scream so that way we can make a massive payout for this movie, so they'll want to do a sequel. But I don't know. I think the other ones probably made a big amount of money, but it is what it is. So as far as sequels goes. So we have Richie and we have Sam make it to the hospital, and so when both Sam and Richie make it to the hospital, they see Tara there, and they go on and they see the people who will probably get killed in this movie. We end up having Sam kind of re-meeting up with guys that, of course, are to be Mindy, Liv, Amber, Chad, and Wes. Where is Wes in here? Oh, there he is. Because he doesn't have blonde hair in his picture. uh, Weirdly enough, we have Wes, who is actually to be the son of Deputy Judy Hicks. Evidently, Deputy Judy Hicks, I guess, was in Scream 4. And so I guess since she didn't have enough time in the sun in that movie, they are going to have her be put into this film for her to have technically some a little bit of time in this movie. So we have Sam wanting to have her alone time with Tara, and so we give them their time, and so we go on and we of course have Sam telling Tara what had happened, how like Sam had confronted their mother about the whole Billy Loomis thing, and so that's why Sam left. And we eventually find out that later on that Tara is a little upset that Sam was to just run off, and because like Tara would have like wanted her old sister to still be there and so on and so. Anyways, pushing on. So we have Sam, after going and talking to her sister and kind of just catching up, all of a sudden we have Sam who's going on and catching up with somebody else who is to be the ghost of her biological father. Going on and having Billy come back and kind of like come back in this reflection that seems like that's where mostly he is to go and be, like either in some rear view mirror or to be in some kind of like mostly reflection instead of actually being like right in front of her. So we of course have Billy that is to B saying that Sam's like psychomedication isn't working all that well, or psychotic medication isn't working all that well, and Billy is to come back to her to just kind of like be this Jiminy on her shoulder, like wanting her to eventually go on and kill some people. So this is kind of like Friday the 13th with Tommy Jarvis, where like Tommy Jarvis is to consistently think that he's like seeing Jason a lot, but actually it's just his own imagination playing with him. So, but all of a sudden Sam is to get a phone call, and of course it is to be Ghostface. And so Ghostface goes into this hospital and starts attacking Sam. And this whole entire time I'm thinking, is Sam just crazy here? Is she still just seeing things? And like I was kind of hoping maybe they could go with that route, where you would have thought the whole entire movie that maybe Sam was just crazy and her mother should have had her tested, because really, like, we could have had that an interesting story, but they don't go with that either. They don't take an interesting story and run with it. I would have liked that to happen. So Sam goes in to tell one of these officers that she was to be attacked by Ghostface. And so now we start to have to question everybody that's in with Tara, or just kind of her friends and whatever. So we, of course, ask Richie, hey, what were you doing? And he's like, hey, I was watching Netflix. And they're like, oh, yeah, like, that's a solid alibi, Netflix. Like, so, so yeah, so we go on and we have it to where now Sam is wanting to go on with Richie to now try to figure out how a certain number of people had survived Ghostface in the past. And so now they're going to go on and talk to Dewey, Dewey Riley. It seems like a lot of times they end up using Dewey's last name a lot in this movie for some odd reason. When really, I guess, like, oh, they're trying to, like, not have to say Dewey every single time. But, like, they rarely used, like, Dewey's last name, but I guess they just, for whatever reason. So we have them go and meet up with Dewey, and we're naturally assuming that Dewey was going to go on with them and really just be like the same old Dewey that we've seen in every single one of these films. And like it almost kind of comes off as this like Hugh Jackman cameo from like X-Men First Class, where Dewey is kind of with these guys for a very brief time, and then he kind of boots them out, and we're thinking that we're never going to see him for the rest of the film. But actually, he's just like, I'll go and I'll help you guys out later on. So Dewey goes on and talks to both Sam and Richie, and so immediately Dewey is to be watching Gale Weathers on the news, because I guess she's some reporter now. And so really Dewey wants to see, of course, Gale's weather, or Gale's, or whatever Gale's doing for the news. So we weirdly have it to where Dewey is to have some kind of picture of Gale, which is kind of this like weird, not perfect picture. But it seems that both of them aren't actually together, because we still have to play the Dewey and Gale will they, won't they kind of thing, to where they're still having to talk about their relationship still in this movie, because it happens again where they have to go through their relationship and rehash that for the 18th time. So, but anyways, so Dewey is to go on and talk to these newbies, and is to mention, it's like, well, hey, first rule is always question the love interest. When you look at any number of movies like I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, where in that sequel we had one guy who was to be called Ben's son, it's like, something suspicious about that, but they never think about it. And this guy seems to be working pretty hard to work and try to get to Jennifer Love Hewitt's character. And we go on to have a number of other movies where it usually ends up being the lover, I guess, because they can't just get into this person's pants, and so I guess it's just wreaking havoc upon their brain. Oh no, I can't get into this girl's pants because she wants a PG-13 relationship. Oh my god. So, how about you just zip up those pants for every once in a while? Whatever. So, Dewey then goes on and is to also say, it's like, well, hey, like, does Tara have friends? And Sam is like, well, yeah, she has a pretty good group of friends. And so Dewey's like, well, question them. Like, more than likely, out of that group, it's probably going to be one of those. Because, dang, this movie isn't all that creative. It doesn't, like, killer out of nowhere movie for this one. So, because I feel like the other killers might have been somewhere close to killer out of nowhere, but this one really doesn't. But anyways, so we then go on and tell, really just Dewey's to tell these two, it's like, hey, your 2 minutes are up, see you later, and kind of boots them out. So we then have Dewey turning around and calling Sydney, and then texting Gail about, hey, killer's on the loose, like it seems like things are happening again. So we have Dewey who gets a hold of Sydney, and so Dewey is saying to Sydney, it's like, well, hey, do you have a gun? And Sydney's like, I'm Sydney Prescott, of course I have a gun. And so Dewey's just like, well, like, hey, things are happening again, I just want to make sure that you're protected. We have Sydney, who of course is not in Woodsbury anymore, because heaven forbid she had been in Woodsbury in a number of these films. She always kind of continues to get dragged back into Woodsbury, and this just so happens to be another one of those films. So Dewey is to go on and text Dale, or God, why do I keep ill pronouncing this name? Gail, and is to text her with a smiley face emoji, and regrets that he is to text her with a smiley face emoji. So we eventually have it where Dewey is just tempted to go back and work with these newbies, because eventually Sydney is to go on and tell Dewey, it's like, well, hey, it's good to have you, Dewey, go on and protect these people, because at least you'll know what you're doing, because you've been through a number of these. You've gotten stabbed 9 times, and really that's the one hesitation that Dewey was to really have here, is that he's been stabbed about as many times as 50 Cent has been shot. And so he's like, yeah, don't want to go through that again. Don't really want to get stabbed. Funny note here, David Arquette has actually been like being a pro wrestler recently, and so it's kind of interesting to just kind of see like David Arquette coming back into doing another Scream, because we have it to where like him doing Ready to Rumble, and people were to kind of like say stuff about David, made him turn around and actually become an actual pro wrestler to get respect from people. But every once in a while, David would toss up the whole Ghostface thing as like, yeah, like I was that guy, like I was in that movie. But yeah, so Just kind of a fun thing for David to come back into these films. So Dewey comes back and is to eventually go on with Sam and Richie as they are going to go on and go back to find, uh, of course, uh, Tara's friends and talk to them. We have, of course, Tara's friends who are all, I guess, at school at some point, and we have like them going and sitting on these wood benches. I'm like, this is just like the other Scream movie. Like I'm just waiting for there to be like schools for summer or some Alice Cooper song that, of course, was used in the other Scream movie. So we go on and we have these kids going on onto these benches, and we of course find out that Wes is to be, of course, the son of Deputy Judy Hicks, retying into that Scream 4 character with now the newbie. And we're like, oh, okay, so let me guess. All these people that we're probably going to see all right here are probably all going to end up dead for the most point. So that's what we just have to naturally assume here. So we go on and we have Sam and Richie and Dewey meet up with these newbies. And so, of course, we have Mindy, who is to go on and be this movie expert, where she is to go on and say how exactly this thing is to be put out here, and how this isn't a just a normal sequel, it's a requel, where really it's just what all of the other like franchises are doing, and they're going back to the original but doing it differently. And so it's basically a requel, weirdly, some goofy thing, where we're going back to the same old beats, but bringing in newbies. But also, there's some just things left unsettled. So, and of course, we have Mindy who's telling Sam that she is to be the main character or the star of this film, and I'm like, no, she's not. Technically, Sydney is to be the star of this film because she's still the final girl from the other film. So, sorry, whoever Sam Carpenter is. You're going to have to just share. You're going to have to share that whole you're the star with Sydney, who has technically been in these films since day one, and now she's back. Really, when using the people from the other films, really when they bring them back here, they kind of use them sparingly. I'm like, man, there must have been a whole hefty amount of work, of these stars that are coming back, because really none of them are really doing all that heavy lifting. So this is just like the Matrix Resurrections, where you have a bunch of people who come back, of course, from the original Matrix, but none of them are doing the real heavy lifting here. Most of the story is to be held by these new people. And so it's kind of funny, the one exchange between Wes and Dewey here, where Dewey, in Wes's eyes, is to possibly be the killer. And Dewey's like, well, wait, Wes, how am I the killer? And Wes is just like, well, because you've been stabbed 9 times, and you've also been, like, Gale is not with you, and you're who you are. So, now Dewey is like, oh my god, like, maybe you're the killer, but because you stabbed into me. Ooh, snap. Oh, funny jokes. So, yeah, so Mindy is to drop the knowledge of who, and how this movie is to be set up, and so we now have Mindy consistently being the smart one here, but I'm assuming she's also going to be the dead one. So, Because, anyways, pushing on. So we can't have another Jamie Kennedy in this franchise of whatever's. So pushing on. So we go on here, and eventually we have uh, our characters go on to this bar. These kids go to this bar, and we have all of a sudden where we are to find out that Liz is to have previously had some boyfriend that is to be, of course, Vince Schneider. And so when they're at this bar, we have both Chad and Vince get into this kind of fight, and Vince is to whip out this knife, forcing, of course, Vince to head out of this bar because this bartender is trying to prevent there to be a fight. Vince goes on and whips out his Johnson to pee off to the side of this bar, basically saying F this bar, so on and so forth. So all of a sudden there's to be music playing in this car that, of course, is to be reminiscent to the movie, the original film, The Red Right Hand. So now we're questioning why is this Vince guy getting killed here? What is the importance of this guy? Well, come to find out, Vince here, the guy who's getting killed in this scene, or Vince, we find out, or we have to kind of figure it out that I guess Stu is to be relative to Vince. That I guess maybe there's some kind of cousins or there's some kind of relatives somehow or another. But surefire enough, Stu is a relative to Vince, so I guess when you go on, you have to go through Billy's family, and you eventually have Billy's mother, who at some point is to be a killer, and eventually you have Sydney's brother, who is eventually going to be a killer. You have to just go through every single rung of family from all these people and kill them all off. So now let's push on. So we, of course, have Wes, who is making his way home to, of course, talk to his mom, and it seems that Wes is to find out that I guess that there's lemon bars in this fridge. So, Judy Hicks. There was one part where she is to go and talk to Sam, and it seems like they have an argument in this film, and so when Sam is to re-meet up with what ends up happening to Judy and Wes here, we have it to where, like, she knows them, but because eventually she has to go and kind of talk to somebody to see how she knows these people, let's just say, because I want to get back to that. So we, of course, have Deputy Judy Hicks, who goes on and drives her car and just goes on. So we have Wes, who's going in his shower, and he's just showering it out, just kind of shampooing his hair, hopefully getting rid of his blonde highlights. Because why? Why do we have these? Why are they there? So, so Deputy is getting a phone call, of course, from the killer, going on and now forcing Deputy to go and drive like a bat out of heck to get back to Wes, because we have consistently the killer saying, like, oh, I'm going to get to your son. I'm going to get to him. Like, hey, do you remember the movie Psycho? Yeah. So we have Deputy Hicks that's driving crazily to make her way back to her son for her to try to scramble back into the house. And so it seems like the killer is not really going after Wes at all right here. It seems like, if anything, Judy here is to make her way back for the killer to come after her and start stabbing into her and kill her here. Then, while Wes is to, of course, get out of the shower and be like, like, how about I go and make some food, and, and how about I just go on and just do any number of things because I have nothing better to do, because I'm just waiting for the killer to get to me. So we then go on and, of course, have it where eventually Wes is to eventually go on and be attacked by this killer, and he, of course, gets stabbed in the neck. And then we, of course, have this killer go on and just murder up Wes. So we push on and have Sam make her way to Wes's house, realizing that these people are dead. And she bumps into Gale, and she's like, "Oh my God, it's you, whoever you are." How does Sam know Gale Weathers? But wait a minute, Dewey technically has a picture of Gale, but I guess like Samantha knows about all these people. Because I guess once she knew about her father, I guess she did a bunch of research on who all these people are. So we go on and have Sam kind of going and meeting up with Gale, like, "Oh, this is you," and that Gale has had some experience with these Woodsbury murders, and Sam is like, "Well, I've had some experience too, because Billy's are dead." So, but we go on and we have eventually Gale re-meeting back up with Dewey, who is to technically be I guess just a private eye at this point, because we have it where Dewey comes back and is like, "Hey, I'm helping out," so we of course have it to where Gale is asking Dewey, it's like, "Well, why aren't you like the sheriff of this place?" And Dewey's to go on and mention that, when he has lost some kind of nerve, he has had some nerve damage also from the numerous times that he has gotten stabbed, and that was the one thing that I forgot about when he was to say that he got stabbed some time before. So, but Dewey is talking to Gale, and Dewey's to say it's like, "Well, they told me to no longer work with them anymore. They told me to retire, so I was kind of forced into retirement." And so that isn't a sheriff here. He isn't working with the police department, and he's just kind of on his own. So both Gale and Dewey just kind of reminisce about their relationship, on how Gale kind of walked out of Dewey, and so on and so forth, blah, 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 blah. All this really boring dialogue and whatever. It's just like them kind of catching up. So we had at one point where Gale was seeing Dewey, and she calls him Riley, and she tries to walk away from him a little bit to just kind of avoid that whole interaction between them, but it happens anyways. So, but we have Gale just kind of ticked off that Dewey was to tell her in a text that things are happening again, and Dewey was just like, "Well, I would have said, well, I'm not sure if you were busy or not." Because I'm sure Gale is busy writing another book, because Dewey is saying every single time that Gale was to be going on and writing another book for another one of these stab movies, that's when every one of these stab movie or Scream things would happen. So pushing on after that. So after Wes is to be now dead, we eventually have Sam, who is to go on and make her way back to her sister, because there's kind of a concern there that they could be going back to Tara. So Tara, of course, is to go on and be at this hospital, and Tara is now kind of suspicious about what's going on, and Sam is also suspicious because she sees that there's so many of these deputies and sheriffs and everybody that are to be out here dealing with this whole West thing, that there may not be any police officers left to cover her sister. So Sam is running off to the hospital to see if she can protect her sister. So Tara is going into a wheelchair and she's kind of wheeling her way through this hospital, all of a sudden finding out that one of these police officers had been stabbed to death. And so now Tara is just trying to get freaking out of this hospital. So all of a sudden we have, of course, Ghostface calling Sam, and we had, of course, also uh, Richie, who was with Tara, and Richie goes on and meets with Tara, but then all of a sudden, like, Ghostface is to stab Richie in the arm, and then Tara is to knock some things over to kind of take Ghostface out for her to have the opportunity to kind of scramble the way she does. And so Ghostface is calling Sam to say, "Hey, like, you have to choose between either Richie or Tara here, and hurry up and make your choice, or I'm going to make it for you." So Tara gets out of her wheelchair and now is dragging herself, and so we also had the one moment in the very beginning of the movie where the Ghostface killer was going and talking to Tara and was to mention the dumb girl who was in the beginning of the movie that ended up getting killed. And so Tara ends up having some kind of snide remark about that. And now we're here where Tara seems to be dragging her body to this elevator to get out of this hospital. And so now we have it to where the Ghostface is saying, like, well, yeah, like, I'm gonna stab into this girl with any of the organs that I missed from before. So Terrace is like, you, like, I'm gonna get out of here. So we have it to where Sam is to go on and tell Ghostface, it's like, well, hey, there's a reason why I'm not going to give you an answer right away, because I'm just eating up time. Eating up time for Dewey to come in and start firing away at Ghostface. And so we have it to where Sam is to grab her sister and try to get out of there. And so Richie and all the guys are going to this elevator, and Dewey here is just like, well, I'm not quite sure that this killer is dead yet, because you always have the rule of, like, shoot him in the head. And so since I didn't do that, I'm going to go back to make sure this killer is dead. And so Dewey has this long stretch of him, like, dumping all his bullets, putting all these bullets in his gun. Now he's going to shoot this killer in the head. He's going to do it the right way. And then we go on and we have this killer who goes and stabs into Dewey, because we had Dewey that was kind of fighting off the killer, and we had Dewey who's saying, it's like, well, not today, I'm not going to get stabbed again. And so then the Ghostface is to finally go on and be like, well, I guess today is that day, and it's an honor to kill you because you're one of the originals. So Dewey is to finally be dead here, but you never know about horror films. It's always just like, oh, well, here's a body bag, but then you'll find out, oh, he's not really dead. He was alive the whole entire time. Surprise, everybody, he's still alive, whatever. But they didn't do that in this movie. So Dewey is now dead, because of course he's dead, because he's, like, how they kind of built up here that he's already been stabbed 9 times. I don't know how many times at the end of every Scream movie he has to be hauled away by some ambulance. So I think now would probably be the perfect time to finally kill this character off. even though I honestly don't want that to happen, but still, killing this character off was interesting, to say the least. I was thinking maybe all of the originals were going to get finally killed off at this moment, but nope. We have these characters that are too good at them surviving now, to where they don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe. They don't fall for the tricks uh, that are just be like, oh yeah, let me help this person to probably get stabbed. Not gonna happen. So now we have it to where Dewey is sadly dead, and so what ends up happening here is that uh, Tara is to now have to eventually go on and go back to I think um, God, what is the girl's house name? Amber's house, because she needs to go back there for something. I think it might have been her phone, or I think it might have been just something else. But we have it to where Tara needs to go to, of course, Amber's place for possibly her phone. And so we have Sam, who is thinking this time around, it's like, well, let's go on and try to do what every single horror movie would not do, and let's just get the F out of Woodsbury, or Woodsboro? Woodsboro, yeah. Um, Woodsbury, I think, is the Andy Griffith thing. Um, Whatever. So, Woodsboro, and let's try to just get out of town and kind of let cooler heads prevail and let somebody else possibly get killed by Ghostface. So that's what they try to do here, and so they're getting Tara kind of up and running for them to just put her in this car. And so while they're doing that, we have Gail come in here, and now we have Sidney Prescott come in here. And so we, of course, have the experienced ladies. They're going on and talking to Sam and just say, like, hey, you can't run from this. Like, the killer is coming after you, and running is never going to solve anything. Forcing Sydney to come back again, this time around, to have to face this again, is just going to be another thing where she can easily convince this girl, like, yeah, I've done this 5 times now. And it doesn't seem like we're slowing down anytime soon. So, but Sam is just convinced that they're going and leaving, and so Sydney's like, okay. So, Gail is to talk to Sid, and Sid is to, of course, mention that she put a tracker on these people, and I'm like, yeah, smart on her. Finally, they're like, here's what they honestly should have done in one of the other horror movies. Put a tracker on the ghost face. So that way, like, man, I wish there would have been some really cool way for them to just be like, oh yeah, like, we have a way to just track this ghost face killer. But it's kind of funny how they always mention, they kind of re-reference horror movies in here, like the Richie and Sam, like they were talking about how this movie is just identical to Halloween. Hence why we even have Sam's last name to be Carpenter, to kind of give a thing to just a fun thing to just kind of name off one of the characters, Carpenter, because of course Carpenter was to do the very first original Halloween and the more recent one. So plus they basically are to tell you what this movie is to be like, but they're also saying in this movie how there isn't to always be this reoccurring killer. There isn't to always be a Jason Voorhees or a Michael Myers that is to just keep on living and keep on like coming back. That there always has to be a newer killer every single time. So so we go on here and we have Tara and Sam and Richie going to Amber's place, and we end up finding out that Amber's place is actually Stu's home. Matthew Lillard's character. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. The guy who is like Stu from the original Scream. This is his house. I'm like, oh my god! Like, I'm sure a lot of people will go on and watch the original Scream to kind of match things up to see if this is the same house or this is. But yeah, so we go on here and we find out that Amber is to own this house. And so we then go on and have Tara and Sam and Richie making to this house. And so Richie is going and having to convince everybody to get out of this party, and because he's saving all their lives. Because he's saying, like, hey guys, just letting you know, like, these women have been consistently trying and attempted to be killed by Ghostface numerous times now, so if anything, you should probably avoid this party because you're probably going to get killed. And I'm like, yeah, like, we have them going back to Stu's house as a party is happening, because that's just like the other Scream movie where we, of course, had Stu's house who had some party, and so we're just mimicking the original film to be the finale. So we have at one point where Amber is going to the basement and recreating the one scene where we had the one girl who goes into the doggy door of her garage door, for eventually Ghostface to hit this one switch and have the garage go up and kill the girl. This time around, we don't have a death happening here. We just have a play on things, where this girl is going and getting beer, who is Amber, and we have Mindy going on and saying how stupid Amber was by going into this basement alone and going and getting beer. And so we consistently have this back and forth between both Mindy and Amber about how stupid they are and how one or the other could be the killer. And Mindy's like, well, I'm the killer. And he's like, ha ha ha, no, I'm not. But I just wanted to see, like... But we have both of them saying that they are the killer or they aren't the killer and the whatever. And so I'm like, just, like, get over it. Like, come on. Like, let's not waste too much time in this scene here. So we go on and we have Mindy going up these flight of stairs, but then she offers to have, of course, Mindy go first as Amber's, like, waiting. So we have so much, like, playing and going on here, and I'm just like, psh, whatever. So we have Liv, who is to be frustrated because Chad is to possibly think that Liv is to be the killer here. So Chad at some point is to have Liv kind of run off because she's kind of ticked at Chad, because she wanted to go with him to some room and just start banging it out. But Chad is like, I think we should just be in a public place with a lot of people, because I'm not quite 100% sure if you're the killer or not. So we have that kind of suspicion throughout these characters a lot, where they're kind of like, who could be the killer in this group? So eventually Chad is to go outside and start to track his girlfriend's phone. And he ends up tracking his girlfriend's phone to go on and, of course, be killed by the killer. Numerous stabs, he falls over, and Liv eventually is to go outside to track where, of course, Chad's phone is, to realize that he's dead. And then she comes back into the party. She's like, oh my god, my boyfriend's dead. So eventually we are to go on to realize Ghostface is here. People are going to end up dead. So we now have it to where Sydney is calling, of course, Sam to let her know, or to confirm to her that this is Stu's house, and the killer wanted her to come to this place. And then Sam is like, oh my god, yeah, like this is the place. So Sydney and Gail are to make their way there, and after they've tracked down um, uh, them to make their way to Stu's place. And so when eventually they arrive into Stu's place, uh, we have them just kind of like, oh my god, we're back here again, kind of thing. But let's kind of back up a little bit. So we now have to figure out with who the people are to be left in this place, who the killer is. So we finally go on and reveal one of the killers is actually to be Amber. So Amber goes on and whips out her gun and starts shooting people. And so, like, okay, well, that's one killer. So everybody starts scrambling off. And so we eventually have it where Amber is to make her way in front of the place and, like, oh, he stabbed me. Oh, he hurt me. Ooh. And we have Gail and Sydney who are like, what are you thinking about this one? And they're like, I think it's a trap. It's like, me too. And like, I'm not going to be falling for this. I'm not going to be falling for the banana and the tailpipe. If you don't know what the banana and the tailpipe is, that's a reference from Beverly Hills Cop, the Eddie Murphy movie, where we had Eddie Murphy going and putting bananas in the tailpipe of one of the cars, and then the cars didn't start. And then the next detectives that come in are like, well, we're not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe. So yeah, we have the trap here, and Amber is to actually be one of the killers. So they go on and they kind of take out Amber here, and so they go into the house and like, okay, like let's see what's going on here. So because they don't actually kill off Amber here, we're kind of like waiting to just kind of marinate on this character. So eventually now we have to go on and find out who the other killer is, and because there always has to be two, because we have to like, so Richie and Sam are kind of scrambling, and Richie is telling Samantha, it's like, well, like, we still have to be suspicious about people because there always has to be two killers for these Scream movies. And so it's like, yeah, who could the other one be? So eventually, when the whole group is being confronted with Amber, and we have at one point Sam having this knife, we go on and we seem to have Sam, who is very trusting of Richie, and so when they're dealing with Amber and they're trying to think of who the other killer is going to be, all of a sudden Richie is to go on and stab into Sam here and be like, yeah, like, I'm the other killer. Yeah, it sucks that I'm the other killer, doesn't it? Oh, and I'm like, oh my god, the guy from The Boys is the other killer. And I'm like, yeah, because like he ended up playing such a goody two shoes character in The Boys. So of course in this movie you would think, oh, he's just the goody two shoes character guy. But no, we really have everything copying and pasting just like the original film. So even Dewey was to go on and tell us that don't trust the love interest, even though she's supposedly been with Richie for 6 months. Don't trust the love interest. So we even had one point where Sam was to not trust Tara, and Tara, I guess, was to be taped up in some closet somewhere, we are to led to believe. So now we end up finding out the reasoning for both Amber and Richie to do what they're doing. And as they go and drag both Sydney and Sam into this one room where they are to now have to explain. And hilariously enough, we have Billy and Stu who explained why they did what they did in the exact same room. It's the kitchen. So we also had a moment where Mindy was to get killed on the couch, replaying the exact same moment where she is to be the Jamie Kennedy character and saying like, oh, look from behind you, and then she ends up getting, of course, killed eventually in this movie. because everybody's to pretty much get killed at the end of this film. So so we go on, and we of course have it where uh, Gale was to also get shot in the chest, because when they were dealing with Amber, Gale ends up getting shot. And then so Gale is telling Sydney, it's like, hey, go on and help those people out. And because Sydney's like, hey, Gale, we should take you to the hospital. And Gale's like, go on and help them. Do it for Dewey. So Gale comes back in and tries to help them out by kind of like dragging her way in there to try to help them out. And eventually she has to go on and take out Amber at some point, because wouldn't you know it, the killers are going to get killed by the end of this episode. What do you think? The killers are going to win this time around? No. So we go on, and we have, of course, Amber and Richie going on with a severely flimsy story that is to really just be garbage, because I guess they were fans of the movie Stabbed. And so that's the real reason. I guess motives are incidental in this thing. So we have it to where them being so vicious fans of these movies, and how I guess certain number of stab movies don't quite hold up that well, and how they're doing so many of them that there's 8 of them out there now. And so I guess their fan base is just to be ticked and whatever for whatever reason. So we go on, and we now have Amber, who had become a fan of this whole stab thing, because she was to own this house, and then she found out the history about it, and that's what became her being this avid fan of the whole stab thing, and that's what made her this killer in this story. I'm like, God, that's flimsy as F, but also so is the Richie story. So that we have this guy that has probably never even heard of the stab movies, and he's watching them on Netflix, and we have the whole Netflix joke and whatever going on. So that this guy doesn't watch as much movies, I guess, as somebody else does. But I guess there's so many hints that Richie could be the killer in this movie. So we go on, and we eventually have both Sam and Richie fighting it out, while Amber is to go on and talk to both Gale and Sydney here, talking about passing the torch, and how Amber should be going on and uh, getting her torch to be given to her. And so what happens is the oven is weirdly turned on, and all of a sudden we have these characters going, take Amber here and kind of put her against this oven to where she's to burst into flames, and they're like, hey, how's that torch for you? Like, yeah, how's that torch treating you? Like, you're getting freaking roasted here. How's about that? You're gonna die. So not much of any torches can be handed off here. So we now have Richie and Sam tossing it up here, and we have it, of course, where Billy is kind of in the shadows, just kind of watching and kind of guiding his daughter to eventually go on and kill this guy. And so Sam is to say the new rule of this horror scenario is really don't mess with the girl who was to be the kid of some serial killer, because Sam is going to go on and murder out of Richie, stab him numerous times, slit his throat and everything, just stab into him so many vicious amount of times. And so after she goes on and does that, now Gale, Sydney, and Sam are all just like, well, we should probably make sure that all these killers are going to be dead. And so they're like, yeah, we probably should. So Sam shoots Richie in the head, and then all of a sudden Amber is to come back, and so they turn and they shoot her, and like, okay, we can confirm they're dead. Is there going to be any more killers that are going to be coming out of the woodwork? No, seems unlikely. Uh, I also forgot about the Terra situation because that's how eventually both how both Sydney and Sam were to uh, eventually get to where they can go and battle these characters by having Terra come out and, uh, of course, hit. I think Terra with these or Richie with these crutches and go on and try to help out here. Uh, and so we had, of course, where uh, like Tara, like we have Richie who's saying that Tara is like, oh well, like there's no way that she's gonna go and like be the savior of these people because she's been stabbed so many numerous times, and so like there's no way that she's gonna come on and help out at the end of this, but she ends up doing so. So that's what ends up giving them the opportunity to go and attack and start to go and take down all these characters. So now we just really have it to where I think this time around both Sam and Tara here are gonna go on their own and like do everything together because like Sarah's to also have to recoup and recover from all of her injuries from this film. So with that said, we have another movie that is to, of course, be wrapped up here, and so really there isn't, I don't think, any much of end credit scene besides there being seemingly another ghost face that is to tell us that there is going to be another killer somewhere down the road. There's possibly going to be another Scream movie somewhere down the road. Hopefully it is to have a much more interesting story than this one was, and it isn't just a rehashing of the very first film, or it's probably going to go into the route of just going on and just like, hey guys, like we're going to do the Cobra Kai thing, because Cobra Kai would go on and like every single like season would just be a copy and paste of the original movies. And so what is it that like uh the sixth Scream is just gonna be like Scream 2, and then we're gonna go on and on and on and just like, well, now we've ran out of things to do. I'm just waiting for Billy's twice removed cousin to have to be killed in this movie, or something along those goofy lines, because it seems like we have to kind of scrape the bottom of the barrel to come up with whoever was really just tied left to the Scream franchise of things. So with that said, yeah, we'll see how everything is eventually tied into possibly some random character from another Scream movie. I'm sure there's certain characters that probably did make it to the end of certain other Scream films, and so maybe they'll come back to just get quickly killed off here. Possibly like how Cotton was, where one of the Scream movies he was to be quickly killed off at the very beginning of the film, so that way they can go on and like, oh no, like Ghostface is killing again, because I'm sure there's still kind of some loose ends from some other Scream films somewhere randomly. So they'll go into that. So with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Hopefully everything was covered in this one. But yeah, it's just a copy and paste of the first movie. Because that's what every kind of back to another franchise of things. And really, a lot of people are like, hey man, like the first Scream was a really good movie, so why not just go back to it? And I'm just like, but that is just an easy way to do another sequel. Uh, it's just lazy writing, and I would have liked there to just be a much more complex of a film, and this movie was not complex enough to my liking. Um, and really, it was just like, oh, that's just what everyone else is doing. It's what Afterlife did, so that's what this movie has to do. And I'm just like, like I don't want that. I want there to be like some really interesting story that isn't just like trying to just be a cash grab. So with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy. Yeah. Bye. All right. One thing that I'm gonna say here, because I'm gonna correct something that I said, because we eventually have Sam going and telling, of course, Richie about her being related to Billy, but really it's kind of after she is to have told Tara, and Richie ends up kind of overhearing it while, of course, she is to divulge this information to Tara at the hospital, and that's how he kind of finds out about uh, Sam's kind of family and stuff like that. We also find out that I guess uh, so Sam's mother was to go and marry some guy, and so Sam's mother was to tell this guy that Sam was her father, but I guess Sam's mother had lied to this guy to get her to marry him. Eventually, Sam is to find old photos and is to find diaries of her mother's, and so Sam was to go on and find out that her actual father was Billy, and so now Sam goes out of her way to confront her mother with these diary entries, and all of a sudden, Sam's non biological father is to come in and find out the truth, and so he ends up just bailing out on this family because this daughter wasn't his own. So he just leaves. He just bails out, and that forces eventually Sam's mother to disown her, to want her to just kind of leave, and so Sam leaves after that, creating some friction with his family. You would have thought then the killers would have possibly been maybe maybe Sam's mother, maybe Sam's father. Maybe that would be an interesting revenge story. But no, it has no tie into anything. It's not even Stu coming back to just like, hey, like, I had orchestrated these kids to go and kill people. No, heaven forbid you have that story, right? So, excuse me. So, anything else I'd probably have forgotten, or hopefully, whichever. I know there might be some point where some people are like, oh, that's not how it perfectly went, and whatever. Because I know there's like certain other scenes of which where I kind of paraphrased or I went back to or whichever. Um, and there's a lot of movie references that kind of get chucked into this movie also. So there might be somebody that's like, oh, well, you didn't reference this movie in here. But I think I got the main focused ones that are be kind of really part of a story. But of course, we're going through every single one of these classic horror films and mentioning them here. So, with that said, I think I hopefully had covered everything, but I'm always unsure about something, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about this little piece, or I forgot about that little piece, to where it just kind of gnaws on me, just like, oh, I didn't cover the whole movie perfectly, or I forgot about a whole big chunk of scene, or whatever. So, with that said, I could probably go on and cover the original Screams, probably, and then somewhere in there will probably be a rebuttal for this movie in one of those if I'm ever to go back and cover any number of other Scream films. But I feel okay now. Like, I think that was the only real left thing that I was thinking about for this film. But yeah, I'm going to get out of here. I am always having this lingering thing of like, oh, did I forget something? So, bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.